am Kara Haro. I am the Director of Section Services with the Minnesota State Bar Association, and I'm very happy to welcome you all here today to our program. So today's program is Power of Attorney and Parental Delegation for Immigrants in our community. We are thrilled to have Chris Courtney here. She's an attorney at law. She is a North Star lawyer. She will be talking first about advising on and drafting powers of attorney. She'll be talking for about 30 minutes. And then we've got Malushka Navoda. She is at Hortensia Law, and she also does a lot of volunteer work with Volunteer Lawyers Network. And she will be talking about DOPA for about 15 or so minutes. We're also going to take some time right after that to talk about uh, issues that you should be aware of if you are going to be visiting clients in their home. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions. So if you do have questions throughout the program, please try and use the Q&A function for that. You'll find that along your toolbar. Just pop those questions in right as you have them, and we'll try to save time for those at the end. Before we get started, I am going to turn it over to Dana Miner, who is our Director of Legal Services with the Minnesota State Bar Association. We recognize a lot of you folks are probably here because you want to activate yourself and find something that you can do to help right now. And Dana is going to talk about a couple options.
Yes, I am thrilled that all of you are attending. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am, like Kara said, I am the Director of Legal Services. I'm here on the behalf of the Pro Bono Council, who is a subcommittee for the MSBA's Access to Justice Committee. So we've been working hard on getting some of these CLEs out so that we can really prepare individuals for how they can support our Legal Services Hub, Immigration Hub, as well as our other partners during this critical time. So I'm getting a lot of questions about how I can help. We really do want to encourage you to volunteer with the Legal Services Immigration Hub. I will put some links in the chat that will include how you can find out more about the hub, how you can volunteer. BLN is accepting a lot of cases. They're drafting a lot of these POAs and DOPAs for the hub partners. So there'll be a registration for how you can sign up to be a volunteer for them. And I'll also include a resource list that the MSBA, we've been really updating that very regularly. So we're including both CLEs as well as the most urgent needs that our immigration hub partners are really facing. I'm communicating with them regularly and that will be my way to communicate those with you. So I encourage you to sign in, to look at that, and to refresh it fairly regularly, because Kara and I are making those updates very frequently as the needs come. I also really want to encourage you to consider volunteering with our existing legal aid pro bono programs that have been around for years. There are going to be a lot of issues that are coming up that aren't necessarily immigration related, but are immigration court related, but do affect this community. So we're going to need this community. There's going to be uptake of evictions. There's going to be family instability and a lot of other civil legal aid needs. So we really encourage you to also create an account on Pro Justice and really look and follow some of those other individual organizations that are doing this work. They need a lot of support right now and their resources. They have very high caseloads at the moment. So again, and stay educated. The MSBA CLEs related to immigration have all been posted on YouTube, and they are available for free. Again, it's on that resource page. So check those out. This one will also be posted for free on Friday if you want to observe this again. So keep that in mind, and then don't forget to volunteer within your local community or donate to legal aid organizations as well. So there'll be a document circulated in the materials that lets you really explore a little bit further about how you can get involved and take action.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dana. All right, Chris, I will start your screen share and then I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kara. So I come at this as an estate planning and probate attorney, which is how I was pulled in to do this presentation. As part of the probate and trust section, I'm the chair of the public service committee within that section. And we've been doing some work in this space for a little while now. And that's one of the reasons why I was partnering with VLN and some other organizations to get some of this information out there and to help people have a place to volunteer. We'll talk a little bit about practically how to meet with clients, especially in their home, at the end of today's session. So the first couple of sections, the first that I'm doing on powers of attorney, will be really focused on the documents themselves. And then we're going to talk about how the meeting should go, things you should remember when you're talking with clients about this work, and also answering some questions at the end. Now, let's dive in. So we're here to talk about powers of attorney in Minnesota. And I know that some people on this session are probably experienced estate planning attorneys where the power of attorney section is something that they know a lot about. Feel free to continue eating your lunch while I'm doing this then. But I also know we're going to have a bunch of people in this session today who've never drafted a power of attorney and don't know that much about it. So that's really what this next section is about. What is a power of attorney? What is the statutory short form? And how do you work through this document with your clients? So the first section, what is a power of attorney? 2 slides up. All right. In Minnesota, basically a power of attorney is a document that gives another person the ability to make financial and legal decisions on your behalf. In some states, powers of attorney are combined to be both healthcare and financial, or they can include a lot of broad powers. In Minnesota, we totally separate the healthcare directive from the power of attorney. The power of attorney is just for finances. That's it. And when we think about how the power of attorney works, next slide, there's something that I really want to make very clear, because I think that this is not always obvious when you read these documents. And the concept of a springing power of attorney versus a durable power of attorney is an important one to understand. So a springing power of attorney is a power of attorney that only gives the attorney, in fact, the ability to actually manage finances when the principal is incapacitated. And a quick rundown of the terms: the principal is the person giving the power to another person. The attorney, in fact, is the person who holds the power of attorney. Colloquially, a lot of the time when people talk about powers of attorney, they'll refer to the person who holds the power of attorney as the power of attorney, like I am my mom's power of attorney, is something a lot of people say. The correct legal term is attorney, in fact, but really, it doesn't matter that much. But just so you know, when you read the document, the attorney, in fact, is the person getting the power. The principal gives the power away. The document is the power of attorney. So a springing power of attorney is effective only when the principal is incapacitated. A durable power of attorney is effective the day that you sign it. Now, I and most other estate planning attorneys that I know and spend time with will really go to the mat on this one. A durable is better. The reason is better. I mean, there are several reasons why it's better, but one of the reasons that it's a lot better is because then you don't have to prove that the person is incapacitated when you go to use the document. So an example that I use sometimes with my clients is that, if one of my parents is incapacitated and I am their power of attorney, if they're at the hospital, maybe they've had a major medical event and they're in the hospital for a couple of weeks, they may ask me, can you go and talk to the bank about this, deal with this, because I can't handle it and they have to focus on their health. Great, I'm happy to do it. But if I go to the bank and the power of attorney is only effective when my parent is incapacitated, my parents are not with me. And even if they were, how would the bank know that they were incapacitated? They don't have someone on there who's a professional who can assess capacity. It's not really helpful to have one that is only effective when you're incapacitated, because when someone is incapacitated, the proof can vary a lot institution by institution. So some banks might require 2 letters from medical professionals. Others might require 1, but it has to be dated within a certain amount of time of when you're taking the action. A springing power of attorney is really difficult to actually use because it's such a high bar to prove that someone's incapacitated. Another reason the durable is better, and I've written down here low risk. And what I mean when I say low risk is people assume if you give a power of attorney to someone when they're able to manage when you're already able to manage your finances, well, aren't you taking a risk that they would steal your money? I mean, they don't really need the power right now, so why are you giving them that power? Well, the risk is lower than you would think it is. And to be honest, if someone really wants to steal from you and financially exploit you, there are frankly easier ways to do it, which is one of the reasons that people don't generally use powers of attorney to steal from you. There are easier ways to steal from you. But the other thing to remember is that if you don't trust people when you have capacity to check on them, you probably shouldn't trust them when you're incapacitated either. But finally, the last point, and this is most relevant for the reason that we're having this CLE today, is that when a person is unavailable, like for example, if they are detained or if they've been deported, they still have capacity. They're just not available to manage their finances. And so it is much smarter to have a durable power of attorney on behalf of someone who's worried about that happening to them. So next slide. So when we have a power of attorney, understand that a power of attorney is like a sharing a power with someone. If I give my spouse a power of attorney, I still retain the ability to manage my own finances. I'm sharing the power with them. They can also do it. Now, if you don't have a power of attorney in place and someone needs to manage your finances, if you're incapacitated, in theory, the people around you can get a conservatorship over you. But if you're just out of the country or unavailable, you can't get a conservatorship over that person because they aren't incapacitated, which means that just no one is able to manage the finances. That causes a big problem. Next slide. So when people get powers of attorney, sometimes they'll say, why is this needed? And from an estate planning perspective, the reason a lot of people will get powers of attorney is because they want to be prepared in case they're suddenly incapacitated without warning. If I get hit by a bus situation. The other reason is they're preparing for future long-term incapacity. Like I'm in early stages of dementia and I may need this in the not too distant future. But next slide. The reason we're doing this today and the reason why a lot of the people that you may be working with to get a power of attorney, the reason they would do it is so someone can take care of their finances if they are unavailable or out of the state or country for some reason, and they need tasks either to be done in person or in a way that simply can't be done virtually. And that's assuming they have access to virtual processes. So next slide. So what are some of the useful tasks that can be handled by someone who holds a power of attorney? For example, they can take care of your vehicle, especially if someone was pulled out of their vehicle and detained. This would allow them to go pick it up, take care of it, sell it if they need to, pay off a lease, handle the things related to vehicles. They can help deal with issues with the landlord. If the person who is unavailable has a home, then they can deal with the mortgage company. They can handle all the utilities. They can also help by transferring money. So if someone leaves the country and then they're going to stay in the country where they've moved, they can help coordinate transferring money to that person. So there are lots of, and those are just the things off the top of the head. I'm sure that there are a lot of other reasons people may want to have a power of attorney under these circumstances. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about specifically the statutory short form power of attorney. Next slide. So in many ways, I think that we live in a really great state when it comes to our forms. We have very collaborative bar associations. As many of you know, a lot of our deeds are standardized. That doesn't happen in every state. And one of the other things that we have is a statutory short form power of attorney. Basically, it's a standardized power of attorney that everybody in Minnesota uses. It's embedded in the statute. That statute is listed right there. You're welcome to take a look at it, but everybody uses the same one. And it's incredibly helpful because it also means, among other things, when you walk into a bank, they'll recognize it because they'll have seen it before. Next slide. It is broadly used. It is really helpful. It does like 95% of what you need a power of attorney to do. And to be honest, if I knew of an estate planning attorney who was drafting their own power of attorney and not using the standard Minnesota one in addition, I would have questions about why they were making that choice because it is so helpful. Now, one of the reasons it's helpful is not just that it's recognizable, though that's pretty great. It's also that it comes with a presumption of validity, meaning that when you present it to an institution, they are not supposed to turn you away. They're supposed to accept it. Does it actually work that way in practice? Not always. Banks are regional creatures. They don't always follow specific state law. And so sometimes you gotta use a little elbow grease to get them to accept the statutory short form. But in general, it actually will be accepted almost everywhere you go. It is also easily accessible online. You can find it on the Attorney General's website in Minnesota, Law Help MN, and other places as well. Next slide. So, do you have to use a statutory short form? No, you don't. You can draft your own durable power of attorney, and certainly many people do. But I will say that for the purposes of representing individuals who are concerned that they might be detained or deported, this is really the document that you should be using. And if you don't have any experience with long form or other powers of attorney, this is definitely the one that you should be cutting your teeth on because this is the standard document in Minnesota. And like I said earlier, it really does do 95% of what you need as a general power of attorney to do. So Next slide. All right, when we think about how you're working with clients, I want to walk through some things that you should be aware of as you're working with people to get the power of attorney in place. So the first thing to know is, well, what is the context of how you're doing this advice? Are you in a clinic setting? Are you doing a one-off pro bono representation through your firm? Have you been assigned through a volunteer organization? There are a lot of different ways in which you might be representing people in this, and that should be part of the context here. Full estate planning clients are going to get things a little differently than someone who's really just, they need the DOPA, they need the power of attorney, and that's it. Next slide. So the first thing I think you always do when you're working with someone on a power of attorney is you just need to slow down and listen. Talk with them about it. Ask them what they already know about the document, why they want it. Find out if this is helpful for them to reach their goals. Under most circumstances, I believe that this is something that would be helpful for most clients who are anticipating possibly being detained or having issues with ICE or other government agencies. Now, talk through this with the clients. So it's a good idea for your goals. Who can serve in this role? They're going to want someone who's good at managing money, someone they can trust to manage it, and someone who's good at communicating. Something else to keep in mind is that they probably should be talking about someone who is not at risk of being deported, not at risk of being detained, because this is part of what their task is. They may need to go out and meet with people and talk with others about it, and that should be something that they're thinking about. Next slide. Now, when you're drafting the document, make sure all the names and addresses are correct. And I can't stress that enough. Ask to see IDs or passports, because you want whatever the name is on the passport or the ID to match up with what is on the document itself. So keep that in mind. Make sure that they're correct. I've talked with some people where when they go out and they meet with clients in their home to do this, they'll take like a legal pad and they'll write down all the names. They'll double check everything before they start filling in the document. Because a lot of the time when you're meeting with people, especially offsite, like in their homes, you're handwriting in the document. You're not printing it. So it's harder to make changes. So make sure you get all that information right. You maybe only have so many copies with you. Now, as you go through the document, there are a few different things to look through. There's a section first, second, third, fourth. The first is all the powers that are included. Second is whether it continues to be effective if you're incapacitated. The third section is about whether you can give someone a gift, or whether the person holding the power of attorney has the ability to make gifts to themselves or anyone they have an obligation to support. Like, for example, if I'm giving the power to my sister, am I giving her the ability to write herself a check for $30,000? That's a question to consider. And then fourth, whether or not they want someone to be producing accountings on a regular basis or not. Let's go to the next slide. So in general, as you go through this document, powers included, most of the time people do tend to pick all of the above. Whether it continues to be effective if someone's incapacitated, again, most of the time people tend to pick yes. Whether or not someone has the ability to make gifts to themselves, there could be a lot of variation here, and there are all kinds of cultural things you might want to discuss with families. Many Minnesotan families say no, but some certainly say yes. That's something to discuss with them. And then the accounting request, there are a couple of different options here. One is you can fill in how often they need to do an accounting, like annually, quarterly, weekly, whatever. The other option is upon request. That means the person who has the power of attorney just has to do accountings whenever you ask for it. So you'll want to go through each of those things with the clients, make sure they understand, talk it through with them. Then on this document, by the way, when you print off the power of attorney, it's either going to be 5 or 6 pages long, depending on how you formatted it. The last 2 sections are notices. One of them is a notice to your client that says, here are the things we want you to remember. Just go through it with them. Then that last page is a notice to the person who gets the power of attorney. On that page is where the person who's getting the power of attorney really should read that one through. And just so you know, there is a place on the statutory short form for the attorney in fact to sign, but where they sign, it doesn't need to be witnessed or notarized. So when we think about the actual signing requirements, there are 3 things that happen with the signing. The first is that the principal dates and signs in front of a notary. Then there's a section on like either page 5 or maybe the end of page 4 where it's the notice to the principal. They have to initial. There's a small line there. They have to initial in that line that says, yes, I read this. And then there are the signatures for the attorney in fact. And like I said, they can sign it later. It doesn't need to be notarized or witnessed. So if you're meeting with a client, especially in their home, the attorney in fact doesn't need to be there. All right, next slide. So just as a final checklist, the things you should make sure the client knows, this is effective the day that they sign it. It gives broad financial and legal powers. It does not give healthcare decision-making powers. Just because you give someone the power doesn't mean they have to act. They don't have an obligation to act, but they sure can if they want to. And if they do act, they have to act in the best interest of the principal. It can be revoked at any time. So you can make sure to tell your clients, yes, you can revoke this document. There are a couple of different ways to revoke it. I usually recommend that when you revoke it, to sign a document that says, I revoke the power of attorney made on this date, and have that document notarized and then disseminated. And then remember to tell the client that it's important to tell people where to find the power of attorney and where to find the assets themselves. Power of attorney is a helpful document to have drafted and completed. But if people don't know where to find it, or if they don't know they've been appointed, we have a different problem. So it's important to talk with your clients about, all right, you've appointed this person. How are you going to notify them that you've appointed them? Where are they going to find the document? Is it going to be at your house? Is it going to be somewhere else? Or are you going to find a way to deliver it to them? Tell them that they need to give their power of attorney, the person holding the power of attorney, some instructions about this is where you can find, this is where I go to the bank, this is where you can find this is where you can find that. Those are critical pieces of information the power of attorney is actually going to need, because if they don't know where you go to the bank, I mean, what are they supposed to do? Go to every bank in town to try to find your account? I mean, among other things, that's a little sketchy. So try not to do that. But that's an important part of the conversation you have with the clients is, how is this document used? Where can people find it? And are they going to be able to access things with this document? So on that note, I'm going to turn over and we'll talk about DOPAs next.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to everybody who's here. I am going to start sharing my screen. And in the meantime, Chris, why don't we transition with a question on the chat about the excellent choice of DOPA compared to 257 BO4?
All right. So one of the reasons that we use the DOPA instead of the delegation of a standby custodian is because the DOPA document is effective immediately. So you don't have to prove that the parent is unable to act. You don't have to prove that they've been, for example, detained. And I want you to think through that logistically for a minute. If you had to prove that someone is detained, you can't always do that right away because it takes a while for people to be processed. And something that we've also learned over the last few weeks is sometimes when people are detained, they're taken to the Whipple building and then they're flown to Texas and processed in Texas. And there's a couple of day delay there. But the delegation of parental authority is to have someone take care of your children. You don't always have a couple of days there. So it's important that it's effective immediately. And one of the other reasons the delegation of parental authority is the document that a lot of professionals are using right now is because it also can be effective for up to a year, which is a longer period than the standby custodian. That is only effective, I believe, for 60 days. So that's the reason that a lot of professionals in this space are really recommending DOPAs and not the other document.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Let's go for what DOPAs are really fast. And of course, my screen is not, there we go. Let's run through the disclaimers and the reasons to have a DOPA. So in a way, what you're going to be doing with the DOPA is two things: produce an instrument that will be helpful for the client, but also granting them the kindness to some of them. Some of them are super organized to have a space, a couple of hours, the time that they prepare to meet with you, to organize their documents and find everything that they will need and place it in an accessible spot, and also make all the copies. So think of yourself as somebody who's coming to help them get prepared in both ways, the mental space and the organization that is required, and if needed, and the instrument that's going to be the result of your work. And you can also see it as a more global, from a more global point of view, rather than the times we live in, because ADOPA can be used for people who are detained or deported, who are in risk of going to jail, um, for serious illness, or when somebody leaves the country. And it is for the temporary care of a child because it only lasts 1 year, um, and up to 1 year. And it is hopefully used before children are eh, at risk of not having somebody to take care of them. So hopefully it is done before a detention or deportation. But some of us have had the sad reality of having to chase a client from place to place and try to get their power of attorney or their DOPA once they are detained. It is a simpler, cheaper option to family court. And at this time, there are very few families who are at risk for immigration issues who can afford to go to court, do a more complex document, or uh, try to embark in something that might be more challenging. Also, thankfully, we have various places where the DOPA is available and where anyone in at least 3 languages, Hmong, Somali, and Spanish, can do it themselves with a lot of help from a very well drafted app. So let's go to the background of what ADOPA is. And a parent does not give up parental authority. Um, it is just, if you wish, sharing it. They don't lose the custody of their child. They are not giving away the option to be the guardian of their child. And the statute is very specific in that there is not permission to allow for the marriage or adoption of that child. Who can be the delegated caregiver? I am going to pretty much just rely on what Chris mentioned and make it even more important because, of course, our kids are more important than anything that we have. So it must be somebody who's 18 years old. And it is very useful to help the parent think not only of somebody who's responsible, but somebody who would be patient with the child if it is a child that requires patience. And I assure you, kids whose parents have been deported will require enormous amount of patience because of the enormous weight that we're putting on their small shoulders. And the DOPA form is a creation of Minnesota state law, but unlike the short form power, there are slightly different forms. It is not as perfectly created a form. So you can adapt the form that is online if you know that all of your clients are going to need a specific thing, and then go from there. Um, so let's look at the things that are important in addition to the financial and responsibility and work. It may be an extended period of time, over a year. And so it is a very good idea to counsel your client to make sure that the child knows the person that's going to be in charge of them, cares about them, invites them to lunch. The parents can invite them to lunch. They can take the child to school. Just familiarity is going to make things way, way easier. So let's start thinking about what other things can be useful. And the list is provided very helpfully by VLN, which has prepared this slide deck. I have just tweaked it a teeny bit. So all mistakes are mine. All good things come from VLN. two sets of important documents in separate envelopes for each child. It's crucial that each kid has two sets of envelopes, and because one is going to have the originals and the other one is going to have the copies. And it's usually better to have even a third, just in case. And this is the list of what they need to know: allergies, daycare provider, daily routines, add things, go through the conversation with the father and mother or grandpa or caregiver or guardian, and make sure that they know exactly what the child is going to need. And the documents. This list is very extensive and you'll have it in your material, so I'm not going to go through it, but definitely the social security card. And while you're collecting all these documents with the client and putting them in their envelopes, you might even bring along envelopes because people may or may not have them in their homes at this time. And in each envelope, you're going to be putting the security card of the kid, the child's medical information, the name, and you're going to be making sure that the exact number in the social security, passport, birth certificate is there. That's the delegation of parental authority form. The 123 is very simple. And the statute where it comes from. And what it delegates is, again, just the care for school, doctors, child care and supervision, and some domestic and international travel. But for that, um, do talk to the client about whether they already have a passport, whether they need to get one for the child, and where they are going, because things vary a lot. Mostly what you're going to need is the name and home county of the attorney in fact, the county where the parent will get the DOPA notarized, because same as in the power of attorney, the person giving the DOPA is going to notarize, the person accepting the delegation is not. And the parent does not have to go to court. The parent does not have to sign before a notary. And here I'm giving you the example of the form I use. Worry not, I'm not disclosing names of humans that I serve. It is a call out to Argentina when in the first decade of the century, over 700,000, you could call them undocumented Italians arrived, and one of my favorite novels by Edmundo de Amici had Marco trying to find his mom. And so it's a one pager. It's simple because some of the powers of attorney have two pages. Invariably, if you have more than one kid, things are going to get scrambled at the worst time. So I like it short. I go for the year. I don't choose. Many powers of attorney allow you to choose between 6 months, 7 months. Give the time. It's so easy to revoke if things get better, but play it the way you need with your client. And we already went through what needs to be signed and how. I just want to make sure that I put this big and loud so that we all remember it, because it can be a very emotional conversation, and sometimes one gets distracted by the whole goofiness that we're living. And it's one DOPA per child, and it lasts 1 year. Um, and they do need to do a new DOPA every year. So if you want, just leave them with more DOPAs than they need, than they have, than the children, than four DOPAs, like for example, because then they are going to be able to use it if they expire. Um, Hopefully, we won't be in this situation for too much longer. The way DOPAs end is at the will of the parent who has, or guardian who has provided it, um, by writing, and after a year. When the beauty of the DOPA is that the app at Law Help is super easy to use. So you can even guide a client through Zoom for them to do their own power of attorney if it's an emergency and you cannot meet with them in person. And but there are times when a lawyer should be consulted. And some of us who don't do family law or estate planning law should refer to a specialist. And then that's when there are issues of custody, when the child is going to go to another state, or eh, when the parent has any question about whether the DOPA is the right choice, just dig in a little bit and make a referral accordingly. This is the perfect place for finding and doing a DOPA. And thank you so much.
Thank you,
Back to you, Chris
Malushka.
and Kara.
All right, so before we do our Q&A, I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk a little bit about what you need to know if you are representing some clients, especially if you're going to their home. So when we think about how this works, I want you to understand that you need to spend a little bit of time as an attorney figuring out how you're handling the malpractice part. I want to touch on that very briefly before we go even further into this. So let's say like you volunteered through a legal aid organization and you're doing a clinic. Just check with them when you sign up and make sure that either the clinic is covered under your malpractice insurance or you're covered under that organization's malpractice insurance, which is usually how that works, the latter. I mean, now, sometimes you'll end up volunteering in other ways. And for those of you who've signed up to volunteer through the Public Service Committee of the Probate and Trust Bar, I have given some fairly robust instructions around malpractice insurance, namely that it needs to be under your own firm's malpractice insurance. And you need to call your carrier and find out what their requirements would be for you to handle that. Also, regarding, and I've seen some of the questions here coming up in the chat, when it comes to your coverage as an attorney, remember that if you would feel more comfortable with a representation agreement in place, which to be honest, that's how I feel, then bring a couple of representation agreements and you put in there like bring a version of your limited scope representation agreement, right, that you're doing DOPAs and POA, advice only, drafting and executing just those documents, and keep a copy for yourself. Make sure that you enter the client's name into your firm's system so that it's part of conflict checks and so forth. But this is something you can talk with your carrier about a little bit. And if you have questions around the ethics of this, even if you're doing this and it's outside your practice area, if you're a lawyer and you're helping someone do a power of attorney and a DOPA and you're notarizing them, I'm pretty sure the client thinks that you're their lawyer. So if you have any questions about that, again, call the PR board for an advisory opinion, but I'm pretty sure that's straightforward. So just spend a little time thinking about that. Now, when it comes to what happens if you're going to a client's home, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that because I think this is important stuff to keep in mind. First thing, you'll be arranging with the family ahead of time to go there. Spend some time figuring out what your approach is with the client so everyone's on the same page. A lot of the time, these families have been living in their home. They're not leaving their home unless they absolutely have to. And they really do dread, a big knock without warning. So talk with them ahead of time. Are you texting when you get there? Are you using like WhatsApp or encrypted text to let them know that you're there? Figure out exactly what the communication is going to be if you're just going to go at that time and describe what you look like. And again, think about this a little bit like you're someone who's nervous about taking an Uber, like many of women, I'm sure, who are here are think about that too. Describe yourself, this is about how tall I am. This is what I'm wearing. This is what my coat looks like. This is the color of my hair. If I'm wearing a hat, this is what my hat is. So they can identify who you are. Don't bring someone with you unless they know that person is coming to describe who that person is. For what it's worth, if you volunteer to do this through the schools, like for example, I'm a volunteer through some schools, they actually assign an educator to go with me who the family is familiar with. So they will recognize that person as well. And there are different ways that different organizations are handling this. But make sure you give an ETA. I've also heard in the past that it's a good idea just to drive around the block before you park, make sure there are no loitering vehicles, or if they are, let them know. If you're going to an apartment, make sure that you're not following someone in, and make sure you don't let anyone else in with you. Follow their instructions for how you get rung up. Make sure the door actually closes with the latch as you walk into the building. If there's a Ring doorbell, we've been advised not to use the Ring doorbell unless the client has specifically authorized you to do so. Ring doorbells are sharing a lot of their data with the federal government, so that's something to just be aware of. Maybe try to stay out of sight of a Ring doorbell. And again, check in with your clients about that when you go there. Once you're inside, make sure to dress modestly. Be prepared for a bunch of different situations when you get there. For example, a lot of people don't have standard Western furniture. There may not be like a chair or table for you to sit at in the same way. So just figure that out when you get there. Always take off your shoes. This is very important for a lot of cultures. This is something you do. Even if they say, no, 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 you keep your shoes on, don't do that. Take off your shoes and make sure that you are wearing socks when you walk in. That's also appropriate. So just, use some common sense about that. Now, when you're working with them, again, expect that this is going to take some time. So when I have done this in the past, even when it was in my office, I was typing things and I was able to print them off because they came in, we met, we did everything there. That still took me 2 hours. If you're handwriting everything in, if there are multiple children, this is going to take you a while. Bring way more blank copies with you than you would expect, because there may be other people who live down the block. You may end up doing DOPAs and POAs for like 5 sets of families while you're there. So expect that this will take a long time, longer than an hour, probably longer than 2. So give yourself plenty of time so that you're not rushed. If you are offered food, take it. In many cultures, the food is how they say thank you. It's important to accept the food if it's offered to you. And the thing, and this came up a little bit in the chat too, I saw this conversation about names. It is a really good idea, especially with children, to look at their passports when you're putting their name into the DOPA itself. If the person who is receiving the DOPA, the person who's going to take care of the kid, if that person has to travel with the child to reunify them with their family later, the DOPA is going to have to match their passport documents. For Latinos, you want all 4 names. Get all of the information, please. So please try to be very thorough about names in particular. And when you leave, remember that you want to leave quietly and quickly. Make sure that door latches behind you. Don't be all goodbye, people. Be a little subtle about this. But also when you go, as a courtesy, offer to take their trash out for them. Because remember, for a lot of people, some of where they're worried and risk is when they're actually leaving the building. So offer to take their trash with you and dispose of it either at your own home or find out where the trash can is and put it in there for them. Something else that I wanted to stress, because I know that the sort of person who goes to law school, maybe we're normal before we go, but by the time we tend to be a little more perfectionist and a little more anxious about things. Remember this thing I'm about to say, which is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We're all doing our best here, and just try to not be paralyzed by trying to follow every rule specifically. When people come into my office, I have one way of handling things. I do typically excuse people from rooms, for example, if they're someone who's going to be nominated. Ideally, you do the same thing if you're meeting in their home, but that might not be practical. And so you're going to have to read the room and handle things the best you can. And remember, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Malushka, did you want to add anything to that?
Just read your room, and it is going to be heavy. It is going to be debilitating in some ways, and it is going to be incredibly encouraging in others. And so, um, if you need to follow up later, um, and send the printouts, and do different notarization, the best thing is to bring along a notary or to be a notary yourself if you're comfortable doing so. Chris, you found the scene? with a notary?
Yes. I don't think about that as much because I am a notary and most attorneys in my practice area are as well, but you're going to want a notary with you. If you're not a notary, bring someone who is a notary and make sure you communicate that with the family. And there are, I believe, probably more notaries out there than there are attorneys. So if you need to be paired with someone, part of how you can figure that out is the organization that you're working with to do this, if you're working with an organization. And I want to touch on that briefly, which is that, for example, I'm signed up through school systems to do this. Like I've reached out to my local community school. I've given them my contact information, as well as I have a large spreadsheet of attorneys in my practice area who've offered to do this work. And I've provided that with schools as well. But I've also formally gone to schools and signed up and said, if anyone needs this, I'm happy to go and do this. And a lot of people, like at the school systems, there are often educators who are notaries who are just doing DOPAs. And they really don't feel comfortable doing powers of attorney because that is really a lot like practicing law. So that's why they're doing DOPAs and not always powers of attorney. I'm happy to do both. But if I needed to be paired with a notary, it would be very easy for them to assign a notary to me at all of these meetings.
And the way I've been doing it, and I love that we have a community of both um, uh, people who are going to do it for the first time and from the chat experienced practitioners. And of course, you, Chris, is I do a DOPA from the mom and the mom to the dad, from the dad to the mom. And then just because some of them are not married, just because whatever. And then one from the mom and the dad, if they are both there, to the first and second option, because at least in my community, even with papers, people are getting detained and deported. So I usually have plan A, B, and C. But do I have to do mom to dad and dad to mom, or is that usually overkill?
I usually think of that as overkill because I think both the parents have a custodial right. But
Good, 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 good. Even if they are not married, right? Because they are declared. Sometimes they aren't. So yeah. So like the the child's certificate doesn't show the mom or the dad. But good, uh, good. I'll stop over lawyering. Thank you.
I did see a question in here about a note about vehicles, and I did not mention that earlier. I intended to. If you have used a vehicle to do constitutional observing or to go to protests, we would ask that you not use that vehicle to meet with people, especially in their homes, because that just heightens the risk for everybody. So find a different car.
And for the the POA, when there is real estate, what we need to put into the lines for real estate is the actual legal description that we need to get from the title to the real estate. We cannot put just an address, right? That was one of the other questions that wasn't there.
Yeah, I saw that. And that's one of the places where I would say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think the travel documents are probably most important. And if you want to throw on some AKAs, throw on some AKAs. But sometimes, in order to know what the actual title to the deed is, you have to have a copy of the deed itself. And that can be quite laborious to produce on no notice. And that's something that I wouldn't always expect people to have on hand. And that just creates another barrier to getting any form of the document done. So I wouldn't insist on that. I would just do the best you can.
Yeah, because it's going to be difficult in some counties to get the legal description. Hennepin Recordese is amazing. You usually would be able to get it, but some of the counties are quite cumbersome. And maybe we can start a link with Chicago Title and have them send us information if needed, or one of the other title companies that and titles. They are being super useful and kind. Ask for help because everybody wants to help in your network. You know who will be reliable and good. Um, and if you have a question, for sure, reach out to VLN and your community of attorneys?
I think we've seen a few comments that have come into with attorneys with some experience with this who said they always do reciprocal DOPAs when couples aren't married. So I think I'm wrong. Do it. Do reciprocal DOPAs.
I always over lawyer. What can you do? I'm a bond lawyer and a real
Yeah.
estate lawyer. Yeah, over, yeah, and then I obsess of not over lawyering. And let's see, what other question was because there was some repeated question.
I
Um,
also saw a question that just came in that what if the family asks you for other favors, such as delivering a message or picking up groceries? How should that be handled? I think you have to make that decision on your own. Depends on your comfort level and what it is you want to do.
I love the
Certainly,
idea of a
yeah.
portable printer. I know the portable printer is super helpful because you're going to be in many, many situations where the client doesn't have a printer at home or has a super old printer or frankly doesn't have paper because they haven't been going out. And so the idea of bringing a portable printer is great, along with your notary if you're not a notary, um, or bring the pre-printed forms and just fill them out. And try to keep things light because even if your gut is just wanting to cry at something, um, and I realized uh, uh, that this wasn't supposed to be an emotional a time to give you, but um, I really think that at this time, lawyers can bring one of the best things that we do is organization and process and order. So, one of the other things that we're gifting them with is a time when can focus on a separate issue. And the separate issue is how am I going to get the right instruments to allow other people to take care of my children? And that is going to bring a lot of peace of mind. And for you, even if it is really hard to do it because you're trying to accommodate a mother or a father leaving a child, which is something that nobody should be in a situation where they are risking that by action of government um, in the way that we are seeing it. That gift of organization and the instrument and the piece is going to be enormously helpful.
Chris and Malushka, I want to try and loop a few questions in together. There's so much coming in through the chat and through the Q&A, so thank you for all being very patient. I am going to circulate the chat to all the attendees as well because there's so much great information there. It can be kind of hard to sort through everything. I am seeing a couple of questions um, about DOPAs. One of them is, can you confirm whether or not you can have a backup agent on a DOPA or do multiple DOPAs for the same child? I feel like we're kind of getting that question a couple of times.
Multiple DOPAs for the same child because um, yeah, okay. So if the parent has two sisters, one has papers to I'm gonna give a clear example. Um, one has a permit to work and the other one is a resident, but the resident is in Mankato and the kids are in Rochester, and the person with one of the with just the permit to work, not the full residency or the full citizenship, is closer. The person from Mankato is not going to be able to come as fast. So yes, please do more than one. This is a good time to over lawyer, I think, in some ways. Of course, you know, um, mm, with kindness, but then ask the parents to zoom in to the person that they are going to give the DELPA because they may be not able to leave their homes either. because we're all scared. I have citizenship, and I assure you, it is not a fun time to be a little brown, short, and person with an accent. So even the people with citizenship may not be available. So also help the father coordinate or and mother and or grandmother guardian coordinate between the people with the DOPA and give them clear examples of who's going to do what, when, how do they coordinate. And there's this wonderful thing that is called WhatsApp, which I have better reception with internet in Canada and in Peru, so I'm always in very close contact with my family. However, in detention, um, is there is a period of time when we're not even going to know when where that person is, and it's sometimes really hard to find them over 2 or 3 days. So the plan needs to be done as to what has to happen among the adults before you visit them, so that it can be an effective visit.
And Malushka, there's a couple of questions in regards to if let's say there's a parent with joint physical and legal custody with the other parent, but if the other parent objects of the DOPA, or maybe there's one parent is out of the country or mom is hiding because the dad is an abuser. Did your response already answer that?
No, no, that is a super good question. Chris, help me out here. Let's attack this one together. Please, you go first, and I'll go second if there's a couple of things that I've seen that might be helpful.
I'm sorry, I was looking through the chat. Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. I'll kind of combine these two. Could you please, actually, I'll read the first one first. Can a parent with joint physical and legal custody with the other parent grant a DOPA, and is it effective if the other joint parent objects? There was a similar question, a slightly different, but what if the other parent is out of the country or mom is hiding from a dad because he's an abuser? What's required? Um,
The abuser is easy. By the statute, you don't have to, the mom with the custody can do what the mom feels is best for the child, and it is in the statute. Um, um, Chris, do you?
I think that if the other parent objects, you're going to have a problem, and they're going to have to sort that one out. Um, that the reason that DOPAs are really great is because they don't require you to go to court. It just means someone can take care of the kid right away without triggering like child protective services or a bunch of other things that are complicated. But if people aren't getting along and they can't come to an agreement about this, you're going to have to expect that it's going to be more complicated than that.
Agreed completely. Just have them. If you the mom or the dad are gonna tell you right away when they are doing their first intake conversation before you go home something about whether both parents are gonna be at the house or whether they are in complete agreement to what's best for the kids. If they aren't, just as Chris say, it's probably best to refer.
As with most things in law, one document is not going to solve every possible problem that could, or deal with every possible scenario.
well, that leads me to another good question. Should the person with the delegation also have a separate HIPAA authorization to access the child's medical records, or is the DOPA sufficient for that?
So I think this is actually a really interesting question because if you go on the Law Help MN's website and you use their DOPA, it doesn't specifically say anything about HIPAA. But if you, like me, are an estate planning and probate attorney and you look in the like drafting wills and trust desk book, their version of that document actually has a separate paragraph that has a HIPAA inclusion, which I think is interesting because it's clearly someone thought, it was a good idea to throw this one in here too. Now, like I said earlier, the thing about using a standardized document that can be really helpful, same thing with the statutory short form power of attorney, is that if you use the same one everyone else is using, they're going to recognize it and they're going to be able to use it in most places. But I don't know that it will work under all circumstances. So in some places, is that going to be enough to be able to access medical records? Probably, but also probably not everywhere. So
Another thing is to encourage the parents to build. So I think the most encouraging thing that has been happening is to realize how much we care about each other um, as Minnesotans. And I know that there's some people who have just arrived in the state, and I can assure you that as somebody coming from Chicago, I had more of a culture shock coming from Illinois to Minnesota than from Arequipa to Rock Island, Illinois. But in any case, the key here is that this is a wonderful opportunity for communities that have been balkanized to start cutting those barriers to being a full part of Minnesota. And so I realize that many of them don't want to come out, but I assure you that there are people in the banks that they bank themselves, that are delighted to do a Zoom. Why? Because when you take the DOPA, or excuse me, when you take the power of attorney to the bank, if they have already had a Zoom with the client, while the client is here, it's going to be way easier. And there are many, many banks. I am just going to put it out a shout out to, of all places, Wells Fargo and the Richfield branch. They are being amazing. The Bridgewater, same thing. Oh my God. A Bremer, now Old National. They are totally willing to accommodate those things that they will need, and make sure that the client has everything they need to access their accounts from abroad, or to have a second person access their accounts in the most orderly way. Similar with the doctors, have your clients talk to their pediatrician and know what they are going to accept. It's a quick call. The doctors are freaked out about everything these days because they can't take care of their kids as well as they could, because they are not even going to see them. So to give them an easy ball to bat a home run, yes, to the office person. No, we don't take DOPAs. Yes, we take a form. Here's the HIPAA form that we'll take. Would be wonderful.
Something I want to drop in because I've seen this come up in the chat a little bit is the question of multiple originals. I would say at least triplicate, maybe four of each, because think of where you would want to have it be. You would have one with the parent in their homes. People know where it is. If they can get one to the person who would take custody of the kid, that's one should be there. One should for sure be in the vehicle that they're using in case something happens while they are driving. And ideally, honestly, on that DOPA, post-it note right on top that has the phone number of the person who's going to take custody of the kid. Because if someone is detained while they're driving, listen, ICE is not, they have instructions. They're not supposed to leave minors alone in cars. They're supposed to wait until someone comes. But it would be awfully smart to have easy contact information available right there in case something like that were to happen and someone came by. So this is something that to think about. And then the fourth, again, over lawyering, just so you have another one. I don't know, we can all probably think of a place to store that extra one. So when I say bring many, many copies with you if you go to someone's house, I really mean bring many, many, because they, again, might pull in their neighbor and then their other person over here. You might end up doing these for a lot of different people that you're not necessarily expecting to.
And Chris, on that note, is you're having if you've got multiple copies for one particular client, right? Are should all of those multiple copies be signed and notarized, or can copies of something that's signed and notarized, or is that acceptable?
I think we're still a little bit in the early stages of how these things are actually going to work out when they're in place. So I think some people would want the original and some are going to want copies, and also some are going to be emailed places and so forth. And the question that was asked was, can DOPAs be used to take the minor out of the country? I actually think they can be, but you should know that it's a Minnesota document, which means that you're going to want a direct flight if you're trying to do that. Because if you got to go through other states, it might cause other issues. There are other travel consent form documents out there. Some may be airline specific. So this is a complicated question, but in general, under most circumstances, yes.
For all who are asking, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with different pro bono opportunities where these services are needed, other pro bono opportunities where services outside of DOPA and outside of POAs are needed. There's just a couple of things. Maybe we'll do a quick blast through here, Chris and Malushka. The first question was, what is the 5% that the statutory form does not cover? I think that was related to the POA.
Listen, this is Chris talking. This isn't like a statistical analysis here. But what I'm saying is, like, if you want to create a trust for someone and fund the trust, you can't do that with the statutory short form power of attorney. You can't change the beneficiary designations on retirement accounts unless they're consistent with an existing estate plan, so on and so on and so on. But they're like small enough and not important enough for the purposes of our conversation. You want the statutory short form.
And the other thing is taxes. It is a good idea to just use, I mean, you can definitely use the POA for some things with taxes, but the IRS and in Minnesota Revenue have their own non-notarized POAs for different things. So if clients are going to have to file with just the started season, that might be a good thing to bring along. And they can do that themselves. They do not need an attorney, and probably their accountant or bookkeeper is a better person to fill it out. But that's something else that Minnesota Revenue will require their own form, as will the IRS.
Looking through the last couple here. Do any of these forms, well, we know already, I think we said that the DOPA needs to be renewed annually. Does the POA ever need to be renewed?
Okay, so that question was like whether or not they get stale, and the answer is no, it just continues to be effective. And as a quick reminder, sometimes people get Alzheimer's and live with it for 20 years, and we're stuck with the POA they made 20 years ago, and people move and addresses change, and we still use that same POA, and we get by with it. It happens. So we do the best with what we have, and that's a lot of how the law works anyway in practice for our clients. So no, it doesn't need to be renewed. Yes, sometimes regional institutions will sort of get weird about ones that they think are a little too old, but we just do the best with what we have.
And are there attorney-client issues if the attorney, in fact, is present during the conversation with the principal? Should you ask that person to leave or get consent to a privilege waiver in that case?
I mean, in a perfect world, you would definitely have everybody leave except your client. You would make sure nobody felt any undue pressure. I mean, we're all influenced by the people around us, so of course they're being influenced by world events. That's why they're doing these documents. But undue influence from the people in the room, sure. If you can ask them to leave and you can have a quick talk, do it if you can, but that's not always going to be practical or possible. So again, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but do the best with what you can and document if you feel you need to for your own records. Certainly I would.
And Chris, I think the last three questions that are open, I think we've gotten to all of them at one point or another. They may have just kind of came in out of order after we've. But let me know if you think differently. I will say, as Chris has taken a look at that, I did post the CLE code in the chat. It is 543273. I will email this out to everyone. Should have been in the email that came to you yesterday afternoon as well. It is still pending. We planned the CLE on very short notice. That's so much of a thank you to Chris, who had presented this last fall and was able to renew this and put this together with everything that has been happening over the last 4 weeks, and Malushka for stepping in and taking the DOPA portion of the presentation. We really, really appreciate it. But I think we've hit almost everything, and we'll send you a suite of things as a follow-up. So thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you. I guess we don't have to stay warm anymore, but we'll still continue to stay safe, everybody. Chris, thank you. Malushka, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to
Thank
everybody
you all for
here.
coming today.
All right. Take care.